Yesterday we stopped at after this paragraph. Sotapati Samyutta, story of Digab, a youth who took the difficult route, emphasizing insight to the stage of non-return. I'll continue with the next paragraph. Text chapter 10, section 3.4 makes further distinctions among those who attain arahantship and the stage of non-returner. Such suttas point to the great variety that can exist even among those at the same spiritual level. It is because he was able to make such distinctions that the Buddha was said to possess perfect understanding of the diversity in the faculties of sentient beings. So this paragraph talks about further final distinctions among those who attain arahantship and stages of non-returner. And this points out to one skillful quality of the Buddha, which is possessing perfect understanding of the diversity in the faculties of sentient beings. Why is this important? When the Buddha understands the level, the spiritual level of the person he is talking to, he can adjust his teaching accordingly. So the Buddha don't give the same teaching to everyone, but he adapts according to the disposition, to the spiritual level of the disciple. And this is why one of the many reasons we respect the Buddha. Yes, Sister Chaikwan, would you like to continue?
Since non-returners have eradicated the 5 lower factors, they are no longer bound to the sensual rhyme of existence. However, they are still not entirely liberated from the cycle of rebirths, but are still bound by the 5 higher factors. Desire for existence in the form rhyme. Desire for existence in the formless rhyme. The conceit, I am, subtle restlessness and ignorance. The conceit, I am, asmi, mana, differs from identity view, the view of self, sakkaya ditthi, to which it is partly akin. The view of self affirms an enduring self-existing in relation to the 5 aggregates, either as identical with them, or as their inner core, or as their owner and master. But the conceit I am lacks a clear conceptual content. It lurks at the base of the mind as a vague, shapeless, but imperious sense of the I, as a concrete reality. Though the view of self is already eliminated at the stage of stream entry, the conceit I am persists in the noble disciples even up to the stage of non-returner. This is the point of the incisive K. Maka Sutta, text chapter 10, section 4.1, with its 2 beautiful similes of the flower's stand and the laundered cloth. The noble disciples differ from ordinary people in that they do not buy into the conceit I am. They recognize the conceit I am as a mere figment of the imagination, a false notion that does not point to a self, to a truly existent I. But they have not completely overcome it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sister Chaikwan. Okay, so this one is a little bit technical, but this one will be easier to understand if we refer back to the table. So let me scroll back a this table, the summary table of the four stages. Stream enterer, see the first factor mentioned here is identity field. And then if you go all the way to Arahant, see the third last element, you can see conceit. Yeah. This is what Bhikkhu Bodhi was talking about. Conceit, I am, and identity field. Yeah. Both seems to be very similar, but Bhikkhu Bodhi pointed out the subtle differences between those two, identity field and conceit, I am. To recap quickly, identity field is relating to the five aggregates. Yeah. We relate to the five aggregates as our identity, but the conceit I am is more subtle and more foundational, lurking at the base of the mind. Okay, let me go back to the paragraph. And the one highlighted in red mentioned that conceit I am and the identity field of self, is partly akin, partly similar. The field of self affirms an enduring self-existing in relation to the five aggregates, can be identical with them or as their inner core or their owner and master. But the conceit I am lurks at the base of the mind as fake, shapeless, imperious sense of the I as a concrete reality. The field of self is already eliminated at the stage of stream entry, but the conceit I am persists all the way until you reach an arahantship. Only arahantship eliminates the conceit I am. Sister Aikim, would you like to continue?
The subtle attachment and the residual sense of I am that persists in the non-returner both stem from ignorance. To reach the end of the path, the non-returner must obliterate the remaining segment of ignorance and dispel all traces of craving and conceit. The critical point, when ignorance, craving, and conceit are eradicated, marks the transition from the stage of non-returner to arahantship. The difference between the two can be a subtle one, and therefore standards for distinguishing them are necessary. In text 10, section 4.2, the Buddha proposes several criteria by which a trainee and an arahant can determine their respective standings. One of particular interest concerns their relationship to the five spiritual faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. The trainee sees with wisdom the goal in which the faculties accumulate, namely Nibbana, but cannot dwell in it. The Arahant sees with wisdom the supreme goal and can always dwell in that goal. The text that follows offer different perspectives of the Arahant. Text 10, section 4.3, characterizes the Arahant with a series of metaphors elucidated in the same passage. Text 10, section 4.4, enumerates 9 things that an Arahant cannot do. In text 10, section 4.5, the Venerable Sariputra describes the Arahant's imperturbability in the face of powerful sense objects. And in text 10, section 4.6, he enumerates the 10 powers of an Arahant. Text 10, section 4.7, an excerpt from the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, begins as an account of the attainment of arahantship through the contemplation of the elements. The relevant passage was included in the previous chapter as text 9, section 4.3c. The expositions then turns to the four foundations, Chattaro Aditana of the Arahant, here spoken of as the sage at peace, Muni Santo. Text 10, section 4.8. The last in this section is a poem extolling the Arahant's distinguished qualities.
Okay, thanks, Sister Aikim. So the first paragraph talks about how the conceit I am, what is the origin of the conceit I am. It stems from ignorance. I like this. Okay. The critical point when ignorance, craving, and conceit are eradicated marks the transition from the states of non-returner to arahantship. The difference between the two can be a subtle one, and therefore standards for distinguishing them are necessary. By them, I suppose we could be referring to non-returner and arahantship. So what is the other difference that Bhikkhu Bodhi pointed out? Now, the trainee sees the wisdom nibbana with the goal, but cannot dwell in it. However, the arahant sees wisdom with the supreme goal and can also dwell in it. So that will be the main differences. And then the following paragraph talks about arahants. The 9 things arahants cannot do. This is interesting one. We will take a look when we read the sutta. And arahant's imperturbability in the face of powerful sense object. This is very tough for us. If I see a bowl of ramen in front of me, how can I resist it? But arahant can resist everything powerful with regards to sense objects. Okay, so this paragraph is all about arahants. And Sister Shomi, would you like to continue?
The first and foremost of the Arahants is the Buddha himself, to whom the last section of this chapter is devoted. The section is titled The Tathagata, the word the Buddha used when referring to himself in his archetypal role as the discoverer and bringer of liberating truth. The word can be resolved in 2 ways. Taken as Tathagata, thus come, it implies that the Buddha has come in accordance with an established pattern which the commentaries interpret to mean the fulfillment of 10 spiritual perfections, the paramis, and the 37 aids to enlightenment. Taken as the Tathagata, thus gone, it implies that he has gone in accordance with an established pattern, which the commentaries interpret to mean that he has gone to Nibbana by the complete practice of serenity, insight, the paths, and the fruits.
Thanks, Sister Shomi. After the paragraphs about the Arahants, now we talk about the Buddha, the Tathagata himself. Firstly, we examine the word Tathagata, firstly interpreted as Tata Agata, thus come. But secondly, we can also take it as Tata Gata, thus gone. Sister Billy, would you like to continue?
Later forms of Buddhism draw extreme distinctions between Buddhas and Arahants. But in the Nikayas, this distinction is not as sharp as one might expect if one takes later texts as the benchmark of interpretation. On the one hand, the Buddha is an Arahant, as is evident from the standard verse of homage to the Blessed One. Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Sama Sambuddho. On the other, Arahants are Buddha, in the sense that they have attained full enlightenment, Sambuddhi. By awakening to the same truths that the Buddha himself realized. The proper distinction then is that between a Sama Sambuddha, or perfectly enlightened Buddha, and an Arahant who has attained enlightenment and liberation as a disciple, Sawaka, of a perfectly enlightened Buddha. However, to avoid such complex locutions, we will resort to the common practice of phrasing the distinction as that between a Buddha and an Arahant.
Okay, thanks, Sister Billy. Later forms of Buddhism, very clearly seen in the Mahayana Buddhism, draw extreme distinctions between Buddhas and Arahants. But in the Nikayas, in the early texts, the distinction is not as sharp, Bhikkhu Bodhi pointed out. As we read the standard verse of homage, the one we chant in the morning as well, Arahants are Buddha from that line, because they have attained full enlightenment, somebody, by awakening to the same truth that the Buddha himself realized. Okay, so one proper distinction we can say, a perfectly enlightened Buddha, Sama Sambuddha, but Arahant attain enlightenment as a disciple of the Buddha. This is one way to make the distinction between Arahants and the Buddha. I'll continue with one more paragraph. What then is the relationship between the two? Is the difference between them primarily one of temporal sequence, with perhaps a few additional capacities specific to a perfectly enlightened Buddha? Or is the difference between them so vast that they should be considered distinct types? The Nikayas display an interesting, even tantalizing ambivalence on these questions, as the texts included here illustrate. Texts chapter 10, section 5.1 raises the question about the difference between the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, and a monk liberated by wisdom. Apparently, the expression Bhikkhu Panya Vimuta is used here in a sense applicable to any Arahant disciple, rather than solely to one who lacks the formless attainments. That is, in an inclusive sense, not as wisdom liberated Arahant contrasted with a both ways liberated Arahant. The answer the text gives expresses the difference in terms of role and temporal priority. A Buddha has the function of discovering and expounding the path, and he also possesses a unique familiarity with the intricacies of the path not shared by his disciples. His disciples follow the path he reveals and attain enlightenment afterward under his guidance. This paragraph gives a more further details on the distinction between the Buddha and the Arahants. Okay, I will stop at this point. Any questions or comments? If not, would Sister Billy like to do the dedication?
回向，愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了。不愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。
Thanks, Sister Billy. Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a terrific Tuesday ahead.